Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. Welcome back to my permaculture garden here in Zone 8B in Portland, Oregon. Now, obviously I'm inside, and that's because it is very gray and windy and rainy today in Portland. But I just got a giant load of wood chips dropped out on the very front of my property out by the street. And I thought, you know what? This is a great time to talk about the ins and outs and ultimate guide to ordering wood chips through ChipDrop. Now, I'm not sponsored in any way by ChipDrop. I have a real kind of love-hate relationship with them and a lot of mixed success. So I thought this is a chance for me to talk about the things that you need to know before you order from ChipDrop, what you can expect from ChipDrop, how to use your resources, and maybe some kind of hints and tips to help you be more successful utilizing this service. Now, if you live somewhere where ChipDrop doesn't exist, there are other resources for getting free or cheap wood chips. Before ChipDrop was a thing, I used to call my electric utility. When they trim around power lines, they have lots of wood chips and they're often willing to give them to you for free. So for several years before ChipDrop became a thing, I always used my electric utility as my source of free wood chips. The second thing I did is if I saw arborists anywhere in the neighborhood trimming trees, I would give them my business card and say, hey, you don't have to pay to dump those. Just give me a call and you can come dump them on my property. So those were my two main sources. But ChipDrop was created several years ago as a very clever business model. When arborists are pruning trees, they have all of this biomass, right? Limbs and logs and chipped up wood, leaves, pine needles in the back of their truck. And they have to pay to dump those. And so ChipDrop was created to connect gardeners who wanted wood chips with arborists who had a surplus of them. Arborists no longer have to pay the dump fee and you get free biomass for your garden. ChipDrop initially was 100% free, and I signed up like the second that it became available, the second that they launched in Portland. And I had very mixed success early on. Now I want to say here I've gotten probably 30 loads of wood chips from ChipDrop. I've gotten loads and loads of chips from them. So I have a lot of experience ordering, a lot of experience with what can go wrong. And in the early days, things went really wrong. I think that the organization was run by someone who was an arborist and saw the potential, but used lingo that arborists use. So initially you could sign up on ChipDrop for a load of logs, a load of wood chips with some logs in it, or a load of wood chips. And the term log means a very different thing to a homeowner than it does to an arborist. And so the first time I said, I'll take a load of wood chips and I'll take a few logs with it. I came home and found that my entire front yard was covered in huge rounds that weighed hundreds of pounds. And apparently I'm not the only one who had that experience, because ChipDrop very quickly changed their description of what you get if you get logs, and they make it very clear you can get whole trees. We're not talking a log you put in your fireplace. We're talking bucked rounds that may be 2 or 3 feet tall and maybe bigger around than you can reach, or it could be logs several feet long weighing many hundreds of pounds. So when you go to order wood chips on ChipDrop, unless you're somebody who can handle bucking and splitting that kind of wood or has a use for very large pieces of wood, don't sign up for the logs option, and think twice before you sign up for the wood chips with a few logs. I noticed my neighbor recently signed up for that option, and it's wood chips and probably, at least a dozen very large logs that would not fit in your fireplace, and your average person would probably have a difficult time lifting. As time went on, ChipDrop started giving the option you could kind of sweeten the deal a little bit. If you want to consider paying an arborist 20 or 40 or 60 bucks, you might get your load a little bit earlier. I want to say I have never paid for a load of wood chips. I am willing to wait rather than pay 20 or 40 bucks. I've never felt I had to pay. I do sometimes have to wait longer. I have multiple friends who consistently pay 20 or 40 or 60 bucks and find they get wood chips quicker. So just so you know, that option is there. When you sign up for ChipDrop, you have your location, you select one of those 3 options. And so I always pick just wood chips. And then you are notified that you will get a load of wood chips with no warning. They don't email you, they don't text you, they don't call you. They will show up whether you're home or not, and they'll dump on your property. You can list in your request where on your property you would prefer that they dump. I have found they honor that about 30% of the time. If I'm home, I can sometimes run out and grab them and say, wait, I don't want you to dump them here. I put in my note that I want you to dump them over here, and they'll honor it. But in general, you kind of get them dumping wherever it's easiest for them to, and often that means in the street where I live. So you get no notice, you sign up for a load of chips and you're saying, I am willing to accept them whenever they arrive. If your wood chips don't arrive within 30 days, they send you an email and they ask you to renew your request for chips. I have never had to wait more than 30 days, but I have friends who've had to wait months. I think part of the reason I consistently get wood chips is that there is an area where you can list what species you will and will not take. And I'm really flexible. So let's talk about that for a moment, because I think that's really an important element here in utilizing ChipDrop. When you order wood chips, we're not talking wood chips that look like bark chips that you buy in bags from the big box, home improvement store or the garden center. We're talking chipped up trees. And sometimes there's some other crap in there. They say that they try to make sure that there's no, invasive species or blackberry or ivy or bamboo or what have you. But I found there's often little bits of those things mixed up in it, especially ivy, because ivy is an invasive species that does a great job of clambering up a tree and sticking to it. So when they remove a tree and chip it, there often may be bits of English ivy in there. So when you request your wood chips, you can say, I don't want conifers. I find folks in my area frequently say, I want pretty chips. I want chips that aren't full of pine needles. Living in the Pacific Northwest, if you are willing to accept a coniferous wood chip load, you will get your chips much quicker, because we have tons of conifers growing everywhere. And the bulk of trees that are chipped and cut down are coniferous trees. I've not found pine needles to be a problem. There is a myth on the internet that pine needles will acidify your soil. That's not true. They may temporarily raise the acidity a little bit, but as they decompose, they come back to a neutral pH. And there is no evidence that there is long-term acidification of the soil from using coniferous wood chips, especially pine needles. So I find I get wood chips more often because I'm willing to just take whatever. Sometimes I will list, I do not want black walnut. I do not want rhododendron, because those are plants that can emit hormones in the wood for up to 18 months that suppress the germination of other plants. That allelopathic effect can persist for a long time after you remove the tree. And so for me, sometimes I'll say, I don't really want black walnut right now because I don't want to mulch my garden beds with black walnut. But in general, I don't discriminate. I do want to say here, I have a mixed experience working with ChipDrop. I have found there is one arborist in town that I won't work with after getting 2 very bad loads from them. ChipDrop says they try to be free of trash, of invasive species, of crap that shouldn't be in your load. One time I ordered a load of chips from a company and it basically was just shredded pieces of wood. Clearly something was wrong with their chipper. And another time I ordered from a company and there was a lot of bamboo mixed into it, and they're not supposed to have bamboo. So you may put there are species of wood that you will and will not take. You may say, I don't want any conifers in this load. I don't want any pine needles. And you may find the arborist does not give a crap. They will just dump whatever they have on your property. It's where you don't look a gift horse in the mouth a little bit. You might not get exactly what you wanted, but it's a free resource. So try to make use of it. I have found folks post in gardening groups a lot, I got a load of chips from ChipDrop. Holy heck, it's moldy. That's not okay. That's what wood chips do. They may be in the back of an arborist's truck for a few days until the truck gets full enough to dump on your property. And you may find that the chips are moldy, especially if it was wet when they were removing the tree. That's what happens. Fungal spores are on the tree and in the environment and in the truck, and they will continue to proliferate in your wood chips out in the garden. That is how it should be. You might want to wear protection, breathing protection, if you are sensitive to spores when you are spreading your load of wood chips, but fungal spores are normal, and you can't give your arborist crap for getting a load of moldy wood chips. That's just nature. I have found that ChipDrop does very little, basically nothing, to remediate issues between you and the arborist. When the arborist delivers a product and it's not what you signed up for, ChipDrop basically doesn't do anything. They say you and the arborist work it out. So when I had gotten one load that was particularly bad and not as described, they told me to take it up with the arborist, and the arborist said, sure, I can come pick up that load in 7 months when my business slows down. Well, I couldn't leave it sitting up by the street for 7 months. And so there really was no recourse for me. So you just need to be aware, how can you use that biomass? You might not get exactly what you want with Chip Drop, and you need to be willing to accept that that's how the system works. And it's not the same thing as buying bagged bark chips at the garden center. Depending on the time of year that you order wood chips, your load can look hugely different because different trees are being trimmed and removed at different times of year. And there are obviously different points in the tree's annual life cycle. If you order wood chips in the spring or summer or the autumn, and you get deciduous trees, oh, I cracked my finger, and you get deciduous trees, it will be full of leaves. Folks often complain, oh, I wanted pretty pristine chips and it's full of leaves. But that's what you're gonna get. And the rapidly decomposing leaves of deciduous trees are really stinky. They smell really bad. And so some folks are really put off by that. But I've found that if I take the leaves and I use a pitchfork and I layer them on the bottom and I put the wood chips on top, that deals with the smell. And also those leaves break down very quickly into beautiful black fluffy leaf mold underneath the wood chips. So I don't mind if I get leaves. If you want an order of chips that is free of leaves, order in the winter when the trees have already dropped their leaves. I have gotten 2 absolutely pristine, beautiful, unbelievable loads of wood chips, one of them 15 yards from Chip Drop, that were maple. No leaves, no bits of anything else. Absolutely gorgeous. I don't know what giant maple trees they were taking down, but they were the most lovely chips I've ever seen. And I used them in my front yard, and boy, oh boy, it looked really good for a long time. But in general, even if your load of wood chips is mixed species, even if it's got needles and leaves in it, it will look nice applied in your garden. And in permaculture, we do care about aesthetics, but also maybe our idea of what is aesthetic is a little less homogeneous than other gardeners. And so when you use that kind of mixed material, you're creating a more diverse environment for microbes and fungi, but you are also creating a really beautiful and protective layer over the exposed soil in your garden. And so I don't mind if it's not super uniform looking and there's different bits of like twigs and chips and needles in it. That's fine with me. Now, if you are really anxious to get a load and you want to get it quickly, I would suggest that you order at 2 different times of year. If you have a bad ice storm or windstorm, right afterward, lots and lots of chips are available because downed trees need to be removed quickly. And I found for me that if I order at either of those 2 times, after an ice storm or after a windstorm, I get chips right away and I get a big load of them. So that's been the best time. The worst time to get chips is in the late spring and early summer when every gardener in the city is excited about gardening and wants to apply chips. You're gonna get chips in the winter after a bad storm event when nobody wants to be out spreading wood chips. So if you don't mind working in the cold and the rain and maybe even in the snow, you can get big loads of wood chips, often multiple times in the winter. Sometimes 1 load is not enough for me. And that leads me to my last point about ordering from Chip Drop. The size of your load could be 4 yards of chips. It could be 16 yards of chips. You can get a hugely diverse amount, and I have gotten loads that covered my entire driveway. They were massive. And so you have to be able to use the biomass. I think a lot of folks maybe underestimate how large the load of wood chips is from Chip Drop. And so you need to be able to utilize that. And what I would suggest to most gardeners is don't get freaked out if you see a huge load of chips when you come home from work because they dumped while you were gone. When you mulch with fresh wood chips, they decompose quite rapidly. And I found that I mulch very deeply, between 4 and 8 inches, depending on where I am in the garden. And within just a few months, they compress down a lot. So apply that mulch much thicker than you think you need to, because it will compress not only airspace, but it will begin to decompose quite quickly, especially if a significant portion of it is leaves and pine needles. So don't be afraid to mulch deeply, and you'll find that pile goes down quickly. So thanks for watching this guide to ordering from Chip Drop and making use and getting the best out of your Chip Drop load. I hope that it was helpful for you. If you have additional suggestions or things that have worked really well for you, or issues that you've had with Chip Drop, please feel free and drop them in the comments. Again, they don't sponsor this channel. I don't actually have any sponsors, not that I'm making a shameless plug that I might consider some someday, but I might. But it is a resource that I think is good, and I think it's a really good business model, even if there are hiccups in practice, and even if I've been frustrated with some of the loads. I've gotten so much fertility imported into my garden. A garden that would take many more decades until it could become a closed system has been enhanced and accelerated because I could bring in all of this free biomass that was otherwise going to be a waste product sent to the dump. So I hope you'll consider whether you can make use of those free wood chips, whether Chip Drop is a business that you might want to work with and that might be a benefit to your garden and to you and to your community. I'll be back very soon. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider clicking like and subscribe.